Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back. Hello there. We have about 3 or so minutes until we start. So for now, I guess just kind of get ready, and I'll be right with you. Hey, Philip. Hello. Hi, Anna. Nathan, welcome back. Yes, the homework's due before midnight, anytime before midnight tonight. So you just email me your copy whenever you're ready. Send it to my address at rvulich@occ.ccct.edu. Hi, Corey. Hope you guys are doing well, having a good week, getting some good rest. Okay, just another minute here. Hey, Peachy. Peachy says hello. Okay, guys, so thanks again. It's pretty much 2:20, so I'm going to get us underway here. As usual, feel free to leave any comment behind as a way of keeping track of your attendance and stuff. And then let me just kind of get us going. So the goal today is to finish up the last few fallacies of unwarranted assumption that we didn't get to last time. So according to my notes, we have to still cover the questionable cause, slippery slope, and the naturalistic fallacy. So we'll start off with those three, and then with the time that we still have left over afterwards, we'll just try to review as many of the other fallacies as we can. And thanks for your question, Philip. So for everybody here, just understand and know that tonight the second homework assignment is due, and it's page 151 and 152 of the textbook. It's exercise 5-3, and it's part 1. That contains letters A through Z. And all you have to do is designate which fallacy of relevance occurs in each of the 26 examples. And in a couple cases, there's no fallacy in there. If that's the case, then you would simply say no fallacy for that response. And yeah, all you got to do is send me that document anytime by midnight. You can leave it as an attached file and mail it to rvulich@occ.ccct.edu. So that homework is due tonight. And what I'm going to do afterwards is I'm going to send around an answer key for that on Saturday morning. And the Saturday morning answer key, you'll be able to use that to score your assignment. But if you like, you can also just check with me to get the specific overall grade. And then Tuesday next week, next class period, we are going to have a quiz on Chapter 5. So we have a few things coming forward in terms of your performance in the class. Homework tonight and quiz number 2 on Tuesday after the weekend. So the quiz is going to be on all 20 of the fallacies, not just the one category of fallacies of relevance. So that's why today's meeting will be helpful for you, because it'll help you kind of review and prepare for that quiz, because we'll go over all of them today if we can. And hi, Brittany, good to see you too. So let's just get back into it. Where we were last time was going through the third category of fallacies, which were called fallacies of unwarranted assumption. And fallacies of unwarranted assumption are called that because they contain assumptions that are not supported by evidence. What's the next one? Well, we talked about begging the question, inappropriate appeal to authority, loaded question, false dilemma, and now we have to go over questionable cause. Okay, so just the next fallacy in the group is this, questionable cause. Okay, questionable cause, it's a pretty straightforward example of a fallacy. This fallacy happens when a person assumes without sufficient evidence that one thing is the cause of another. Okay, so a person assumes without sufficient, one thing is the cause of another. That's questionable cause. Okay, so oftentimes we think in terms of cause and effect, but in certain cases we are establishing a connection between two things that have no causal relationship at all. For example, what if somebody says, like the case of correlation without causation? So in the early 90s, some first-person shooter video games were developed, some of the most advanced that had ever appeared at that time in the genre. There was Wolfenstein, there was Doom, and that has obviously spawned a whole genre of games with the same kind of basic features where you're, showing the first-person perspective of the shooter that's going around and clearing levels by killing the bad guys and stuff. Now, since those games in the early 90s, particularly since the late 90s and continuing to the current day, we've had a whole wave of school shootings and mass shootings by these crazy shooters, right? So somebody might say, okay, well, look, the development of first-person shooter games has been happening at around the same time and over the same time span as we've seen an increased number of shootings in our society, so maybe that's the cause. But that would be a questionable cause fallacy. Obviously, these same video games are played all around the world, including in many countries where we don't see any of the same problems with mass shootings and gun violence that we see here in America. So although you could try and draw a connection between the two, there's not good enough evidence to support the claim. If it was true that that was the reason, then we should expect to see all kinds of kids in like Asian countries that play a lot of these games also engaging in mass shootings, but that's not happening. So it must have something else to do with like maybe the access to the weapons or, maybe our mental health status quo here, some other reason. That could be one case of questionable cause. Let me give you a couple of other possible examples. So sometimes superstition can be a clear example of questionable cause. Suppose that someone's walking down the street, okay, and what happens? They see a black cat walk across their path. Okay, later on that same day, let's suppose they park their car somewhere in a parking spot, and just by randomness, a tree branch that's from an overhead tree happens to fall down on top of their car, causing significant damage to the windshield and the hood. So that's not fun. Now they have car damage that they'll have to repair. What do you think could be a questionable cause fallacy that that person might engage in at that point in time? Can you put the pieces of the story together to tell me what might the person think was the cause? If you followed the discussion there, let me know in the chat. So it's questionable cause. What do you think the person could say in a superstitious manner would have been the cause of the tree branch falling on their car? Yeah, go ahead, let me know. Yeah, that's right, Oliver. So the cat, you know, people have held this superstition for a long time that when a black cat crosses your path, you're doomed to have, I don't know, a certain time period of bad luck. Is it 7 years or is it a more limited time? But anyway, obviously, the black cat crossing the person's path was not actually the cause of the tree branch falling to hit their car. What was the cause of that happening? Well, the state of the bough of the tree, the passing force of wind, the effect of gravity, etc. These are the real reasons that the tree branch has fallen, but it can't possibly have anything to do with the completely separate event in space and time of the cat crossing one's path. Now, if it was true that a black cat crossing your path was bad luck, then there would be all kinds of black cat owners that would be cursed with bad luck all the time. And you know, it's actually kind of sad that this weird superstition is alive in the minds of at least some people. I hope not that many. Most of us would probably agree that it's just a silly, false belief. But it's kind of sad because I know that there are some statistics which show that black cats and black pets in general are adopted at lower rates from animal shelters than animals which have different coloration. I guess it's not the most desired after coat for a specific pet. But I have friends that have black cats. They're adorable, they're cute, they're loving, and these people have great luck. So obviously we wouldn't expect that if this was the real causal contributor to the negative result in the example. You step on a crack, a big conspicuous crack in the sidewalk, and then like a couple hours later your mom texts you and she's like, you know what, I need to go to the doctor right now. I think I slipped and hurt my back. I'm worried maybe I have a little bit of a vertebrae that could have even been shattered or fractured, so I'm going to check it out. Now if you're superstitious enough, you might say, oh damn, now I know why that happened. I stepped on the crack, later in the day my mom's back got hurt, so I must have caused that. You know, step on a crack, break your mother's back. Obviously, though, what was the cause of the mother's event has to do with the circumstances that are local to her in space and time. It can't possibly have anything to do with the stepping on the crack in a separate part of space. Obviously, if that was the cause, then everyone's mother's back would have been broken at some point, given the propensity we have to just walk and not pay attention to where there's cracks or not. So these could be both examples of questionable cause. I'm going to give you a couple more just to be fully complete. Back in, what was it, 1920? Any of you guys ever heard of Babe Ruth, the classic Hall of Famer from baseball? You know, legend has it, I guess, that he pointed one time to the outfield and then he hit a home run, so it kind of like called his own shot. Pretty hard to do in baseball, obviously, when you know batting averages are not even that high in the first place, much less to get a home run. But okay, Babe Ruth, legend of baseball. At one point in his career in 1920, he was traded from, let me get this right, so the Red Sox they traded basically Babe Ruth to the Yankees. And he hated that. He did not like the fact that he was traded. So what he said is, I'm placing a curse on the New York Yankees. So it was like the Babe Ruth curse. And after that, until 2004, they never won the World Series. So like 84 years of failure in the World Series of baseball. And some people said, oh, it's the curse of Babe Ruth. You know, he put the curse on them. And they never won until 2004. Then they finally actually did win. And 2004 victory they had was crazy because they were actually down 0-3. And I think it's one of the only times ever that the team came all the way back to win in 7 games after being all the way down 3. But anyway, yeah, so like if you thought that this was a curse that Babe Ruth could put on the team and that's the real reason for their futility, that's not the cause. The cause for a team failing to do well has to do with the playing conditions, the performance of the players, but it can't have anything to do with a person randomly saying I'm putting a curse on the team. If that was true, then any of us, I guess, could place a curse on one of our disliked sports franchises and then we would expect to see them not do well. But obviously, that's not the way it works. Let's see another example. Now, I didn't know this before, but so Jennifer Lopez, you guys I'm sure have heard of her, famous actress and singer, J-Lo, right? Didn't she just perform for the Super Bowl? But anyway, hopefully you know the reference. Jennifer Lopez, I didn't realize until I taught this class because it's mentioned in our book here, but her mother won $2.4 million on a slot machine when she was gambling at the casino in Atlantic City. I mean, not necessarily the first person I would have thought that would need the extra money because they're already really wealthy from the success of Jennifer Lopez. But anyway, the mother of Guadalupe Lopez, she won over $2 million on a slot. And here was her account of it. She said, well, right before I pulled the lever, I said like a little good luck charm, like to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that's why I won. You know, that caused the win because I said this good luck mantra just before I pulled the switch. Obviously, though, again, that cannot possibly be the cause because if there was a reliable causal link between a person saying a good luck saying and then winning, then people would discover this, they would know that, and then it would become that the house always loses, the casinos would stop being profitable, and then at the end of the day, you know, they wouldn't be able to function anymore. So obviously, that's not how winning at a casino works. It's totally random. It's not like the slot machine can take into consideration that a person has made a statement just before they've used it. So once again, questionable cause. Superstitions all around can be based on this fallacy. Have you ever seen a person who says, well, I need to be wearing the jersey of my favorite sports team while I watch the game because it's good luck for them to win? As if the person's jersey is in the laundry or they forgot to clean it or wear it, that would somehow negatively impact the player's performance. There's no way at all that what the players are doing in the field or on the court can have something to do with a randomly chosen fan's selection of wardrobe or socks or anything else. So when you're wearing your lucky socks or outfit or whatever, it's questionable to say that that causes anything positive or negative to happen later. There's a Latin phrase which is sometimes used instead of questionable cause. And the Latin phrase is, it's kind of long, but it's post hoc ergo propter hoc. Or for short, some just call it the post hoc fallacy. And what that means in Latin is, after that, therefore, or before that, therefore the cause of that. As though just because something happens before something else, it's thus enough of a reason to think that it's the cause of the event. But that's obviously not like a valid inference to make. I was born, and then let's say some years later, Bill Clinton won the election in 1992, but I'm not the cause of his victory just because my birth happened prior to the events of the election itself. So again, we shouldn't just necessarily say that when one thing happens before another, it's the cause of it. To assess a cause-effect relationship, you need detailed, reliable evidence that's repeatable to indicate that that thing actually is the cause. Okay, so there's that one. Now there's two more that come afterwards. Last two, fallacies of unwarranted assumption. Next, we will talk about slippery slope. Okay, so the slippery slope fallacy. This is a fallacy that happens when a person has the unjustified idea that if a certain type of action is either taken or permitted, then eventually all actions of that type will be either taken or permitted. So here we go. The unjustified idea that if one action is taken or permitted, then eventually all actions, make that more legible, all actions of this type will be taken or permitted. Okay, so unjustified idea that if one action is taken or permitted, then eventually all actions of that same type will be taken or permitted. Okay. So sometimes people have these overhyped negative predictions of something catastrophic happening if even one little action is to be taken. And if that's the case, that's a slippery slope fallacy. Let me give you some examples of that. So suppose that a person was making the sort of gateway drug type argument to you. And they say, hey, look, at a certain point in your life, you're going to be tempted to dabble, experiment with alcohol or drugs. But I wouldn't do it if I was you, because if you even take one little sip of that alcoholic drink, it may seem like it's not a big deal, but what it's going to do, it's not going to end with the one sip. Next time you're going to want to have a whole drink, and then you're going to want to have a whole 6-pack, and then you're going to want to take like 20 shots, and eventually you're going to become a totally hopeless alcoholic addict where you're going to have to drop out of school, you won't be able to raise kids, you won't be able to hold down a job, you'll get into trouble with the law. And that's what's going to happen if you take that one little drink right now. So don't do it. Taking the one drink puts you on a slippery slope to this horrible negative result later. But is that really a fair assessment? Is it true that one little exposure to the substance is going to lead to a full-blown life of addiction and dependency? Not necessarily. So we can see that as a possible case of slippery slope. You need better evidence to say that that's the reliably produced outcome from people trying such things at least once. Other examples of slippery slope. You see a parent that's dealing with their kid at the grocery store, and their child is saying this, Mommy, Mommy, Daddy, Daddy, whichever one, I really, really want that candy bar. Can't you please let me have it? I know I'm not supposed to always eat candy, but that looks so delicious. I want it. Please, please, please. Now, suppose that someone says to the parent, look, I know the kid wants it and they're begging for it, but I would not give in to them, because if you give in to them on this candy bar today, it's putting them on a slippery slope to where they can never take no for an answer, and you're going to make them completely spoiled. So later on when they're an adult, they're going to not be able to hear no from anybody. They're going to cheat on everything. They're going to be completely irresponsible people. So do you really want someone like that you're raising to grow into that type of adult? So I would not give them this little candy bar or buy it for them. But again, as the book says, there's no credible evidence that giving into the child's demands in this case will lead to them dominating over us and becoming this unruly person later in life. Sometimes people warn us against policy changes or social changes by slippery slope fallacy. Maybe somebody says, look, I would really be worried about developing artificial intelligence, because if we develop artificial intelligence, it might seem kind of cool today when we have smarter video game opponents and stuff like that, and better chatbots to have digital assistants like Alexa or whatever. But the problem is that if we start down this path, later on in life or later on in the world, what do you think someone might argue? Developing AI seems nice and innocent in the beginning, but it's setting us up on a destructive path towards what result? Can you imagine what someone might say here? Why might they be warning us not to build AI, artificial intelligence? And not to worry there, Danny and the others. I see you guys in the meeting. I'm glad that you're here. What do you think about my question? If someone said, let's not build AI, because of what slippery slope result are they thinking would be the result of that? Okay, Philip, so you're saying it will take over and kill us all. That's right, yeah. So somebody might say, oh, that puts us on a slope towards a future where there's killer robots that are smarter than us, that see human beings as like a threat or something that's irrational, that should be eliminated, like a virus. Yeah, so like Terminator will come true. We'll have Skynet, we'll be fighting off these machines and cyborgs in the future. So let's not, build strong AI. Again, probably a slippery slope argument that depends on a whole bunch of assumptions that we can't have evidence for, that we don't have evidence for. What about, for example, with the marriage equality that happened in 2015 when the Supreme Court had a 4-3 decision, which 5-4 decision, which said that in the United States there's no restrictions on marriage equality, people of the same gender or whatever can marry each other, not just a man and a woman. Well, some people said, let us not have marriage equality, because if you allow people of the same sex to marry each other, then you're opening the door to less traditional forms of marriage. And where is it going to lead to? Maybe eventually people will be able to marry their pets, or marry their refrigerator, their household appliances, inanimate objects, marry themselves. So we can't allow that kind of chaotic status quo to take place. So let's not open the door to that. But obviously, since the policy has changed, it hasn't ushered in any kind of wild or weird marital configurations. And so again, it's an overly pessimistic prediction of catastrophe that's not grounded on evidence. Similar to the whole gays in the military argument. So some people said, let's not allow gay people to openly serve, because although it might be nice for those people to feel like they don't have to conceal their identity or hide out who they are, it's going to negatively impact unit cohesion and military capacity. So what that'll do is eventually we'll become so weak and ineffective as a fighting force that other countries will take advantage of us, overthrow us, and then we'll be dominated by these other countries. So let's not have gays in the military. But obviously, since Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed under the Obama administration, we still have the most effective and capable fighting force in the world. We're still the most powerful country militarily, with the biggest military budget. So yet again, a slippery slope. Now, with respect to slippery slope, let me say this. Why is it called slippery slope? It's called slippery slope because it's supposed to call into your mind another visual metaphor. So imagine this visual. A person is standing on top of a high peak of a hill, and it's got these steep slopes that are going down from each direction from the peak. Suppose the person standing up there is considering taking one step toward the slope. And suppose that this is your advice. Hey, watch out, don't take that step. I know you're thinking, I'm just going to take this step, right? What's the big deal? But it's a slippery slope. The slope is so steep and slippery that if you do take the one step, it won't end with that. It's going to cause you to lose your footing and slip. And then as you slide down and fall down the slope, you'll incur further and further and worse injuries as you go down towards the bottom. So let's not take that one step down the slope. That's the metaphor. And as you can see how it applies to arguments, it's somebody telling you, hey, don't allow or permit this action, because if this action is taken, it will not stop with the one action, and it will lead to a further series of actions that become worse and worse. Advertisers and marketers I've seen use this fallacy sometimes as well. I'm not sure which company it was, but a few years back I was watching a commercial, and it was for like an insurance product, and the ad basically said something like, what was it? So if you don't get our insurance, then when you get a flat tire, you might have to wait at the side of the road because you're not going to get anybody to come and resupply the flat tire. And if that happens, then you might end up having to sleep there overnight. And if you have to sleep there overnight, then, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on through a worse and worse sequence of events. Eventually it's like, and then you'll end up in a ditch. So don't end up in a ditch. Buy our insurance. Like, that's the tagline at the end. And so what they're trying to say is the decision, the simple choice not to buy their insurance product led to this, which led to that, which led to that, and it's a worse and worse sequence of events. So basically buy the product. And that's just one example, but a lot of times commercials will make a similar appeal to you as a consumer. They'll say, any decision not to buy our product is going to lead to catastrophe down the line. And sometimes that's not based on the good, reliable evidence that we want. Okay. So slippery slope all around. I've heard sometimes people question, could it ever be a positive slippery slope? Like someone says, buy our product, buy our car, and once you buy our car, you'll be socially successful, and then you'll be professionally successful, and then you'll be rich, and then you'll be living in this great big house with all these beautiful people, and it all started because you decided to buy fill in the blank, our car. Now that also sort of looks like a slippery slope because it's a prediction of a sequence of events that follows from doing one thing, but in general, slippery slope usually is in the negative direction because they're trying to warn you against taking the step, not advise you to do it so that good things will happen. So just kind of to distinguish between those various cases. Thinking back to childhood, I remember a children's story that when I was a little kid they told us. I don't know if it's still something that's familiar to you guys in this new generation, but maybe you've heard of the story called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. I was thinking about that story the other day as I was considering, teaching this topic to you. And in a way, I was kind of laughing because I think that the moral of the story, the lesson that they're trying to teach little children, is kind of like to believe in the slippery slope fallacy, which is not necessarily good. So here's the way the story goes. If this is something you already know about, then just remind yourself about the story. But anyway, imagine a person lives in a house and there's like a little mouse there, and the mouse is hungry and it wants to eat a cookie that he sees the person eating. So the story goes, well, watch out though. I know the mouse is cute and it wants the cookie and you want to be nice, but if you give a mouse a cookie, then he's not going to just want the one cookie. He's going to want another cookie. And then eventually he's going to want the whole box of cookies. And then eventually after that, he's going to say, you know what, I need a little more space to eat these cookies in. Can I have a certain room of the house, or can I have a little area of the house, which eventually becomes a whole floor of the house? And over time, he wants the house. And now you've got to stay in the garage or the shed, leaving the house to the mouse. And so the sort of moral of the story is, hey, even if it seems nice, don't give the cookie, because it's going to be exploited and taken advantage of by the mouse, who's going to end up wanting more and more stuff, eventually pushing you out of your own home. Now, what is a child supposed to think about that? My generosity is going to be abused and exploited. Don't do things for people because it's just going to lead to this negative sequence of events. I don't know. Maybe it's not a great story in a way, or maybe there's something about the mouse that I was supposed to remember that I don't remember, like he's a bad mouse or something. But anyway, just a little point of contact between the current example and some, I don't know, classics of children's literature. So moving on from slippery slope. There's just one more then. Just one more fallacy in the whole list of 20 that we've talked about. Give someone an inch and they'll take a mile. That's also a common saying, Philip, and I think it's in line with the give a mouse a cookie story too, so that's good. Okay, so the last one then for us guys is this, naturalistic fallacy. Okay, so naturalistic fallacy. This one I think is pretty simple to explain. It's a fallacy that happens based on the assumption, the unjustified assumption, that whatever is natural must be good, and whatever is unnatural in some sense must be bad. Okay? Okay, so the unjustified assumption that whatever is natural is good and whatever is unnatural is bad. So imagine that a person says to you, well, if it's natural, it can't be bad. And if it's unnatural, it can't be good. That's not always true, though. It's an overly broad assumption that's not based on a case-by-case analysis of the thing that's being described. So, right, if you think that everything that is unnatural is a bad thing, then you should stop watching this lecture right now and get rid of this computer, because this device that you're watching this on, it's not something that's found in nature. It's a man-made thing. It's created by human technology. So it's not like growing out of the ground or falling out of the sky or coming off of a tree. This is an advanced piece of, computing technology. But it's obviously not a bad thing, right? I mean, human beings, with the intelligence that we have, this form of life, the species that we are, we're able to have extraordinary intervention into the world of nature to make it more hospitable to us and for our own purposes. So we do build computing systems, telecommunication systems. If things that are not natural are not good, then you shouldn't have a smartphone. You shouldn't be driving in an automobile. You shouldn't be using modern medicine or having a wristwatch or even eyeglasses, because none of the things there that I'm talking about are given by nature, but rather through the activities of man. So don't we maybe agree then and understand that it is not true that everything that is somehow man-made or unnatural is a bad thing? Now, certainly there can be man-made things that are not so good. Maybe nuclear weapons. I don't know. Maybe some people might think certain forms of poison and such, right? I don't know, torture devices and all kinds of random stuff. Sure, there's a lot of stuff, nuclear waste, the byproducts of industrial chemicals. Certainly many things that are unnatural are bad. But it would be overly broad and overly simplistic to just blanket say that everything unnatural is bad. And on the other hand, not everything that's natural is good. Okay, so the coronavirus comes from nature, and it's not a good thing at all that we like. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, these things are generated by nature, but they make life much harder for us, and in many cases, they shorten our lives and destroy, human habitation and civilization. So sometimes things that are natural are not good for you. Sometimes things that are unnatural are good for you. Suppose, for the sake of argument, that a person got cancer, and they are thinking in the terms of the naturalistic fallacy. So they might say things like this: I completely reject getting chemotherapy or radiation treatment because that stuff is not natural. And instead, I'm going to use homeopathic remedies and treatments, and I'm going to take my chances with those. Well, that might give the person not the best chance to go into remission or to beat their disease, because some of these extraordinary, man-made methods by which to combat cancer have proven effectiveness. And many of these homeopathic and natural remedies just don't. So once again, you deny to yourself the full range of tools at our disposal to make your life better. If you thought that those things are bad because they're not natural. Maybe then if you think that everything natural is good, you should start going and using, I don't know, like the coca leaf, right? Cocaine and other drugs are derived from natural substances that occur in nature. But if you're standing there thinking, I mean, come on, how is cocaine bad? It grows from the ground. God gave it to us then, so we're supposed to use it. It's given to us by nature. Not necessarily, right? It still contains the same kind of highly addictive and destructive properties that the drug has. And they mention how sometimes advertisers will try and market their products to us by playing on our tendency to favor things that we think of as natural. So, for example, Spirit Tobacco, they market their product as 100% naturally grown tobacco. But obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for us, whether it's grown naturally or grown through the conventional methods of the big cigarette producers. They all contain tar, nicotine, and carcinogens. So, just labeling it with green, natural, organic doesn't settle every possible question about whether it's a good thing for you or for your health. Sometimes people use the same kind of fallacy when they talk about same-sex relationships and orientation, as it says here in the book. The naturalistic fallacy has been used to justify, to argue for the immorality of homosexuality, as in the following: homosexual encounters don't lead to children. That's the natural reason for our sexual organs, so therefore it must be immoral. But, obviously, whether something's immoral or not doesn't have to do just with whether it's natural or not. It has to do with whether it violates consent, whether it abridges human dignity, whether it causes harm. And so two consenting adults doing what they want to do for pleasure doesn't seem to be something that could easily be labeled as wrong just because it's quote-unquote unnatural. On the other hand, sometimes people defend homosexuality by saying it's natural because they'll say, oh, well, we see it occurring in nature with other animals. And so we can sometimes see the naturalistic fallacy being employed by people on both sides of a hotly debated or contested issue or social question. So like one last thing I want to say about the naturalistic fallacy that has always kind of made me think twice about it is this: what really is the so-called idea of the natural? That's, to me, it's not even precisely defined, because when you think of what's unnatural, I guess, what we usually think is, oh, that has to do with man-made activities and technologies. So like, over-the-counter pills and medications, that's another one, by the way. I could have mentioned that. If you think that everything unnatural is bad, then you probably shouldn't ever opt for a surgical procedure, which doesn't have anything to do with nature. Like organ transplants would never happen apart from extraordinary medical technologies that we've developed. You shouldn't take any kind of headache medication or even vaccines. Again, that would be considered not natural according to some way of looking at naturalness. But obviously all those medications and the development of vaccines, of course, are hugely beneficial for us and even essential for our survival in a lot of cases. But what I was getting to was the point that what does it even mean to say that something's natural or unnatural? We look at the behavior of other animals, and sometimes these other animals are able to produce certain objective results because of the form of life that they are, but we don't call that unnatural. So like take bees, for example, honeybees. They can produce honey, and they create beehives. And they work together cooperatively to build these structures, but we don't say the beehive or the honey is unnatural. We just say that's like the natural result of bees in nature doing their thing. Or what about little ants that can form ant colonies and protect the queen in those systems? Or beavers sometimes working together in concert for a long time period can collect pieces of wood and build big dams and stuff that can block off the flow of water. But we don't say that the dams created by the beavers or the beehives created by bees are unnatural. But now let's switch over to the case of human beings. When human beings build buildings, automobiles, other forms of technology, people say that's not natural. But couldn't it be looked at as like this is just another species, the human being, and the development of material technology is just the natural consequence of this life form doing its thing? So I always wonder about that, like when you're holding a computer and you think, oh, this is not found in nature, how is it any different than just a life form dredging up raw materials from the planet Earth and producing something that enhances and adds to its quality of life? So sometimes I would argue that the distinction between natural and unnatural is itself vague and poorly defined. But anyway, as long as we allow such a rough notion, then it still follows that what's unnatural is not always bad, and what's natural is not always good. Okay, so that's all the fallacies really, and just looking back at all of them, in terms of strategies for avoiding fallacies, there's a few things that we can all do. First of all, kind of know yourself. Know which fallacies that you're most likely to fall for, and then which ones that you're most likely to commit. And then you can try to build up, defense mechanisms against the tendency to do that. So if you feel like you're really susceptible to appeals to naturalistic fallacy or appeals to popularity or something, then you might try to build in some self-awareness that cautions you against arguments which rely heavily on that kind of reasoning. You should also try to have confidence and self-esteem. Sometimes when you're that confident, you're less likely to allow people to commit fallacies on you. You'll be more willing to say, I'm sorry, but I got to call you out on that. That's not really a good argument. That's a fallacy. But you need to have the confidence and the courage of your convictions to be willing to say such things. Cultivate good listening skills. Be a respectful listener. Don't just be sitting back waiting for your chance to talk while the other person speaks, but try to honestly listen to them and observe what they say and understand it. When they've presented their view, try to make sure you understand it correctly and try to look for common ground. If you notice they have committed a fallacy, try to be respectful when you point it out. Don't just be aggressive and harsh. And sometimes you might want to ask them if they can give you a more detailed statement of the evidence that they're relying on to get to their conclusion. Avoid ambiguous and vague terms and faulty grammar. Try to be clear in your communication and writing. When there are key terms that are found in your argument, make sure that there's no ambiguity about what they mean so that you can't be accused of committing equivocation. And when you're dealing with another person's argument, don't be afraid to ask them for clarification or what the definition of a term is or what they think it means. Also, and this is very important, do not confuse the quality of a person's argument with the content of their character. Sometimes people will make arguments that you don't like. They're saying things you don't agree with. They're reasoning in a way that you disagree with, but that does not necessarily mean that they're a bad person just on a human level as a human being. So oftentimes people will make claims that you don't agree with, but you don't necessarily have to attack them and think that they're a bad person because of that. We should keep two things separate. The content of an argument, which you want to criticize, versus the content of someone's character. There could be good people that don't agree with you. So try to make sure that you don't confuse the two things and backslide into personal attacks just because somebody doesn't find agreement with you on a particular claim or argument. Yeah, it's kind of immature for you to think that you're the only rational person. And so if somebody else doesn't agree with you, they must just be totally illogical. So be fair-minded. Try to meet people halfway. Be charitable in the interpretation of what they're saying. And if they start attacking your character, take a deep breath and try and make sure that you don't just get into mutual insults, but try and take the high ground. Know your topic. Do your research before you get engaged in an argument or a debate on something. You don't want to make bold claims where you don't even have awareness of the relevant evidence that bears on the topic. Try to be skeptical. Skeptical about your own position, open to the possibility that you could have made a mistake or that you don't know all of the truth or that you might be able to learn from someone else. Be careful about your body language. Sometimes people will be tipped off by the aggressive or harsh or threatening tone or way that you act or look as you present arguments. So try and make sure that you maintain a respectful and a neutral tone. And don't be so obsessed with winning every argument. Sometimes people are so obsessed with winning arguments that they resort to fallacies when they feel like they've lost the rational debate. But it's not all about winning. You should think of the debates and discussions that we have with people as cooperative efforts to reach the truth, not like me versus you and it's combat to see who wins the argument. Even if you feel like you so-called lost the argument, it's not really a loss because you're now coming to a different way of looking at things which may be better and more accurate than your previous position. So there's no need for us to be so obsessed with winning that we end up committing fallacies as a sort of desperate last effort to prevent ourselves from conceding the argument. Okay, so other than that, now that we've talked about all the fallacies and some strategies that you can use to avoid them and to deal with people when they're making fallacies, we could talk a little bit, I guess, about all the different fallacies in the whole list. So on the Tuesday meeting that's coming next, it's just going to be a day of a quiz. As we've had before with the midterm and with the first quiz, there won't be a live stream like this. So Tuesday, it's just going to be, you're going to be mailed the quiz form right before class time, and then you're going to have until the end of class time to send back your answers to me through email. What the quiz will have will be different examples of fallacies where you'll have to you will have to give the name of the fallacy that occurs in the example. And there's also going to be a short section where you'll have to give some examples of fallacies of your own based on the stated name. So we want to both be able to identify it by example and to generate examples based on the name. So let's quickly, if we can, just breeze through some of the different fallacies in the whole set of 20, and that'll be the last thing that we'll cover today, okay? So I want to go back to the beginning where we talked about fallacies of ambiguity, where the argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or confusion between two similar concepts. And let's first just speak about equivocation again. So who knows the definition of equivocation? Let me get that one from you in the chat if you could. What's the equivocation fallacy? So that's one that, I don't know, I guess we talked about it a week ago or something, and you'll have it in your notes, the book, or your memory, or some combo of all three. So tell me then when you've got it. Equivocation, what's that? You'll know it. It takes a minute sometimes to type, I understand, but I'm patient, so I'm just waiting. What do you think? Definition of equivocation. Okay, good, Lan. When a key term in an argument appears more than once, but with different meanings. Right. Can anybody think of an example of equivocation that they come up with? Good, Ryan. That's right. Correct. When a key term in an argument appears more than once with different meanings. So I don't know, like I gave you some various examples just to play with while we talked about it at first. I said like Joe's at the bank is a financial institution, so Joe's at a financial institution. In that case though, we can imagine that the word bank changed its meaning from edge of the river in premise 1 to financial institution in premise 2. So can you kind of create an example like that where there's a word that has more than one possible meaning and that meaning is used in both ways? Let's see. Just take a moment, but it's good to try and generate examples too from the student side of things. So maybe you'll be able to come up with something. If you need some help, then maybe you can meet me halfway at least and tell me like a word that you think has more than one meaning and tell me what you think the multiple meanings are. And then based on that, maybe we could create the example from there. But in whatever way you want to contribute, let me see something in this chat. I want to see something. I want to see either an example of equivocation or at least a possible term that could be subject to equivocation because it does have more than one meaning. So what do you think? I've got a few in my own mind if we get to it, but I would like to see you give me something first. We know the definition. It's a little tricky, but try your best. Even if it's not perfect, try your best to give some kind of example. And you know, as you understand, today's meeting is a lot of it is just review. So I'm done teaching all the fallacies. There's no more to teach, at least not from our book. So this is where we're getting into review, and part of review is to engage and give your own input. So, okay, so you say the word right, Lan. I see what you mean. So what are two different meanings of the word right? Let's take it step by step. And Matthias, I see your comment here. She called me a dog and a cheater, but how can it be if everyone knows that dogs are loyal? Ah, okay, there you go. I get it. So dog in the connotative meaning of like a man that's kind of a scoundrel or whatever. So you could imagine that that's one meaning of it, and another is the literal case of an actual dog. She said men are dogs, and a dog is a man's best friend, so therefore I'm a man's best friend. That could be in a case of equivocation because dog in the second premise refers to the actual animal, and a common feature of those dogs is that they're thought of as loyal companion animals. In the first premise, men are dogs refers to the colloquialism that this is a human being that's kind of like not reliable or dishonest. So we've switched from a dishonest, dastardly person to a literal dog by using the word twice with the different meanings. Now, Lan, let's try your suggestion. You say the word right, and I'm asking you again, what are different meanings of the same word right? So like state for me two different possible interpretations of the same word, because I like your example, but I want to explore it a little more. So what are two different meanings of that word? Right in the sense of blank versus right in the other sense of what? And anybody else here, you guys, I'm sure, can do the same. You can add to the content of our discussion by saying what you think are two different meanings of the word right. So I know I asked Lan because she put it there, but anyone can take up the question. Market versus stock market. Oh, that's also good, Ryan. I'll talk about that in a minute. I was hoping that we could get this thing about right clarified really quick. Right in the sense of direction and right in the sense of being correct. That's correct. That's right, Jordan. So anyway, suppose that someone says, like there's two people driving, and the person at the wheel says, what's the next direction? Do I take a left? And the passenger says, right. Now, you could imagine that their statement in answering right is to confirm that that was the correct direction to go left. Or you can imagine that they are contradicting the person and saying, no, you don't go left. Instead, you go to the direction of the right. And since the word right has both possible meanings, we're now equivocating on the term. So he told me that left was right, which doesn't even make any sense because they're opposite directions. That would be like equivocation. In the first premise, left was right would refer to being correct. And in the second premise, the person says, but left can't be right because they're going opposite ways. Then it's referring to right in the directional sense. I've heard another one about like last class period, a student gave this example. The women's restroom is on the left because men are always on the right. Men are always right. You can imagine that a person would say this because they're trying to say men are always correct whenever it's a debate between men and women. But to say women are on the left and men are on the right is also implying the directional sense of the term. You also, okay, Lan, funny though, I guess you actually weren't thinking of the distinction between correct and the direction right. You were thinking about rights, like in terms of legal and moral rights. So as for example, a person says, you know, I have a right to smoke marijuana. These drug laws are crap. I have a right to do what I want with marijuana. And someone says, no, you don't have a right to do that. Look at the law. So that could be an equivocation between the person claiming a moral right to do it regardless of the law, and the other person saying that in the existing law, You don't actually have a legal right to do it right now. Okay, good. So all these are fair examples of equivocation. Let's continue then and talk about amphibole. So amphibole is the fallacy of grammatical ambiguity or error. And a common example of it is where we have multiple subjects and a single pronoun, but we don't know who the pronoun would refer to. Can anybody think of a possible case of amphibole? It's going to be something much similar to the other kind of amphibole examples that we've all covered and shown in the class and in the book, but maybe you've got something that you could put in there. Sometimes there are plural pronouns like the word them or they, and if you have two groups of plural subjects, then that could be ambiguous. Sometimes there are two male subjects and a single masculine pronoun ambiguously refers to one of them, but we don't know which one. Also with the female pronoun. So I don't know, what can you think about with amphibole? Can I get something from you, perhaps? I'll just giving you a moment. It's okay to take a second here. Kevin fought Justin, and he won the fight. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so Kevin and Justin got into a fight. These are two guys, and you just say he won. But it's not possible to tell who won just on the basis of saying he, because it could refer to Kevin or to Justin. Alex and Anna drive her car home. There you go, because I guess Alex could be like a possible female name, or even if it's not, it could refer to a female subject, or somebody that refers to go by the pronoun of her, as is a possibility nowadays too. So that's all good, correct. The other day, I was talking to somebody about something political, and I think they said, like, you remember the Trump-Biden debate? And I was like, which one? He said, oh, the second one. I was like, yeah, I saw that one. It's like, I thought actually he won that one. And I was like, what do you mean? This is an amphibole. You say he won, which one? They're both guys, they're both men, so it's not clear. So they had to disambiguate by saying something more specific. Okay, well, good, guys. That's all fair and well. Let's talk then about the fallacy of accent. What about accent fallacy? How does that one go? With the accent fallacy, a person changes the meaning of a statement or argument by placing emphasis on certain words in that statement. So as an example, we gave the case of the mother who says, why are you playing with matches? You burned down the shed. I told you never play with matches. Daughter says, yes, haha, but I wasn't playing with them. I was lighting them for science. Obviously, that would mistake the meaning of the original claim or rule, because when they say don't play with matches, we all know that that means just don't touch them or use them at all. But by adding emphasis to playing, it has changed and transformed the given meaning of the original statement. Can anybody think of an example of something like that, a different type of accent fallacy example? What do you think? What do you think it could be? Anything else comes to mind? Just sampling from what you guys have in terms of ideas. Anything that you have is great. But what would you say? Accent. Like, imagine a bolded term or a capitalized, all caps term. Like the way of the person reading it, they linger on that word, and that changes the meaning. No, that's fine with the definition. No problem, Lan. I mean, that helps. That's helpful. Okay. I wasn't, I think, is what you would rather have written, Jordan. So your mom says, people are telling me that you're into street racing, and that's terrible. Why are you speeding around driving like that? You say, well, I mean, I don't know if I would say I was speeding. I was just seeing how fast the car will go, so something like that. But I don't know, though. It's sort of an example, Jordan, but it's kind of hard to understand what the person thought speeding would have meant with the accent added. Like, oh, I wasn't speeding. I was just driving as fast as I could. So I don't know. I mean, isn't that just speeding, though? It's hard to see how there's a possibility for a different meaning of speeding when what the person does admit to doing was testing the limits of the speed of the car. So, I mean, at least with the other example of like, I wasn't playing, there's a clear meaning of playing that is like, I'm creating games and stuff, and that's distinct from just using the matches. But I take your point. I mean, it's an example of a kind. That's fair enough. Anyone else have thoughts on this or something that they could throw out there? Maybe? Oh, I got one. Okay. Want to hear this? So a cop pulls you over, and the cop sees that there is an open container of alcohol in the cup holder right in there in the driver's cabin. So the officer is looking at you, and he says, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to cite you right now because you know the law. It's a crime to drink and drive. So you're not allowed to drink and drive. I'm going to have to ask you to get out of the car. Now, what do you think could be an accent fallacy that the driver could say now? They're sitting in the car. There's an open container in the cup holder. The cop says, it's not legal for you to drink and drive. Do you think you can imagine how this almost humorous response would be from the person? I'm giving you a chance to come up with a punchline, but if you can't figure it out, I'll just tell you. He says, officer says, that's an open container. You are not allowed to drink and drive. And the driver says, okay, I know that, officer. But the thing is, I wasn't. Do you think you can finish that? Think about it. It's going to almost be funny. There you go. Okay, exactly, Philip. So, but you didn't actually place the word in your answer that I was hoping you would, because that would be the accented word. Which word would be accented? Well, it would be like, I know, officer, you say I'm not allowed to drink and drive, right? Well, I wasn't drinking and driving. I drank this beer, afterward I drove. Not driving, Oliver, the word and, okay? Because one person might think that what you're being told is it's okay to drink first, drive afterwards. You just can't literally like drink while you're driving, like drinking and driving simultaneously. So the person is thinking, okay, well, I didn't drink and drive. I drank, put the drink in the cup holder, then started driving. So I didn't do both at the same time. And driving, right? Doesn't that mean I have to do both at once to get in trouble? You guys understand the idea? So and is the big highlighted word, all caps on and. So the person says, I wasn't drinking and driving. I drank, then drove. So I didn't do them both at once, like holding the can of beer, drinking while I'm driving. Anyway, guys, that was what I was hoping you'd come up with. But it seems like you thought I was going to emphasize driving. No, I'm not drinking and driving. I mean, I guess let me try to work with your suggestion. Maybe the person's parked and they say, well, I wasn't drinking and driving. I drank and then got into my car, turned on the engine, and just sat there. So that's what I did. But anyway, that's not really what I was hoping to. I was fishing for the and part. But anyway, now you got it. Okay, so next, division. With the division fallacy, you make an erroneous inference that just because a group has a certain feature, that every single individual member of the group has the same feature. And that's not always true. Like if I say that men are taller than women, and Danny DeVito's a man, that does not logically imply that he's taller than the average woman, because as you may know, he's a very short man that's like 4'10", but he's a member of a group that as a whole has the property of being larger than women on average. Can you think of any other kind of case of division where the conclusion says that some individual of a group has a feature that the whole group has, but it's not necessarily true? Let me know. What do you think? So a division fallacy example, starting with the premise that some group has a quality and a member of a group exists, so the conclusion that the member has the same quality. What do you think? Just taking a second for you to come up with some possible example. Division. Initial claim is something about a group or a whole. Conclusion claim is something about a part of that group. So what do you think? For example, I don't know. The United States is the most powerful country in the world. Dr. Vulich is a citizen of the United States, so Dr. Vulich is one of the most powerful people in the world. No. Just because I'm a member of a big country that's very powerful doesn't mean that every single individual member of the country is extremely powerful or rich or whatever. But that's me. You have to give me an example too. Okay, so what do you have? Sometimes people say that cats are not loyal. So Peachy is a cat. And then someone might say Peachy's not loyal, but that's totally false. I don't know what reputation people have about cats overall. This is the most loving animal ever. Okay, there you go. But no, you got it backwards, Lan. Come on, that's backwards. This is division. So the conclusion has to be about one officer, not the whole group. So your therefore is backwards. Like, can you reverse it? Division is not composition. Composition is the one that says, like, okay, for your own example, Derek Chauvin murdered a person that he was trying to detain. Derek Chauvin is a police officer, so all the cops are murderers. That would be composition, not division. So let's try again, but do a division example. All cops are bad, so if your dad is a cop, he's bad also. I mean, there you go, right? That's the kind of idea, Matthias. Whether there's initial credibility for the first premise, though, I guess is a question, right? Many people, I think, respect police, but you know, there have been conspicuous series of officer-citizen interactions that we've seen in the media, and that's fair to criticize. Anna, men are physically stronger than women. John is a man, so he's physically stronger than women. That's a good also example there, Anna. Good. I'm glad that I hang in there for a minute and gave you a chance to come up with something good and clear. Yeah, men on the whole are, you know, stronger than the average woman just in terms of muscle density and size. But you know that there are these really brawny and intensely strong female bodybuilders and weightlifters and etc. athletes. So saying men are stronger than women, John is a man, therefore he's stronger than women. Maybe John is like, I don't know, not the most brawny and strong John. I'm trying to think of like a John that is diminutive. John Lennon, I don't know. Maybe he's kind of, I mean, tall enough or whatever. Lil John, I don't know. He's small, but he's pretty intense with his energy. Anyway, you get the point. You could have also done it this way. Women are not as strong as men as a whole. And then name a very, very strong woman, like some professional athlete, and therefore say that she's not as strong as the average man. And that would, again, be division. Okay, very good. So thank you so much, Anna, for that. And I guess we've covered composition in passing, just as I talked to you, Lan. Last word on it. With composition, a person starts by saying, here's an individual member of a group. And since they're a member of that group, the whole group has the same quality. Not necessarily true. So if you say, like, I don't know, give a case of a woman that's like a power lifter, then therefore all women are power lifters. That would not necessarily be true. Okay. Afterwards, there were the fallacies of relevance. And I think that you guys have a lot of kind of experience with that, at least because you've done the homework, which involves that category. So one of them is ad hominem, or sometimes it's called personal attack. The personal attack fallacy is when you, you don't reply to your opponent's argument. Instead, you just make a personal attack about them. Sorry, hiccups. So you make it personal. Instead of talking about what's wrong with their argument, you start insulting or abusing them in a way that has nothing to do with the content of the argument. So can you think of any example like that? A personal attack fallacy? What do you think? Personal attack, what do you say? It's easy enough. Just think, I mean, you can kind of work backwards. Think of an insult or something abusive, and then just say, your argument is invalid because of this abuse, because of this thing I'm going to say about you that's abusive. Person one, I think dinosaurs are birds. Okay. What's person two going to say? Well, you're wrong because you smell. Okay, there you go. Good. So the fact that this person smells or something is not at all relevant to the question of whether they gave a good argument. So if you say you're ugly, you smell, your mom's a criminal, who's going to listen to you? That's all personal stuff that doesn't have to do with the content of the argument. So those would all be different personal attacks. You're not supposed to attack the person. You're supposed to assume as though the argument is all you're looking at. You don't even know who gave it to you. It doesn't matter what they look like, what their race is, what their gender is, what their hygiene is, what their record of behavior is. It's just the argument that you're looking at when you're debating. So we should not make personal attacks. Good. There's also scare tactics, sometimes called appeal to force. With appeal to force, aka scare tactic, you try to get someone to back off their position or to agree with yours by threatening or using force, whether force is physical, legal, or emotional, or whatever, or psychological. So your parent says to you, don't tell me that there's an issue with the police in this country because I'm the one paying your tuition, okay? So if you keep saying that stuff, just remember who pays your tuition. That's not really telling you why you're wrong. That's not really saying look, here, I need to tell you why the police are doing a good job. So if there's a bad problem with the argument, you should attack the argument, but you shouldn't try to get someone to back off by saying, hey, I'm gonna intimidate you or threaten you so that you don't say those things or believe them. If your employer said, well, I don't want you to tell me that you believe in that policy because people that work here, that's not okay for people who work here to say that. That person would not be trying to tell you why your view is incorrect or why your evidence is wrong, but rather threatening the elimination of your job. So we're not supposed to try and, scare people into agreeing with us. Even if they did, could we really say that we think that it's sincere? I mean, it wouldn't even be satisfying, I don't think, to get agreement on that basis. Sometimes advertisers and marketers will use the same kind of scare tactics to get us to support the purchase of their products or services. There's appeal to pity. Appeal to pity is when you try and invoke pity or sympathy within an argument to get the person to treat you differently or to give you some kind of special exception to a rule. Common examples of this include the case of the traffic stop, where you say, please, officer, don't ticket me today. My cat died a year ago, and I'm still going through it with that. So, it's hard to focus on the road sometimes. I'm sorry, but if you could just give me a warning, that'd be great. Come on, give me a break. It's sad when you lose a cat last year. Look, obviously, if I lost this cat, I'd be devastated, but she's only 1 year old, so that's far, far away. And in general, after a year, it's time to move on a little bit with your life. I had another cat before these two. She actually did pass away last May, so I could have said the same thing. But no, you gotta pick up the pieces and move on. Not to say there's any issues with loving cats and pets, but the duration of time might make that a weak reason. On the other hand, though, if it's serious enough, then it's not really an appeal to pity. Like if somebody says, hey, my toddler's choking back there, that's why I'm rushing to the hospital. The officer shouldn't say, well, the law is the law, and you're going to get ticketed either way. Because obviously in this case, an exception is warranted due to the gravity of the circumstances when it's life and death. Okay, popular appeal. That's when you try to say that your argument or position is correct because it's the popular position. So you appeal to popular opinion to support your claim or conclusion. Can you think of any such example of popular appeal? Popular appeal, anybody? It's going to be an argument like, this is what most people think, so therefore it's true. Can you give me something like that? What's popular? You probably know better than me. Even though I think I have a sense of it, but yeah. Just let me know. You guys have had some good examples so far, so I bet you'll come with something good here too. Popular appeal, I don't think this is the toughest of all to give an example for. I know a lot of you are probably like, come on, someone else to do it, right? Not me. That's the thing, it's always got to be you. You're only in control of one person, you. So why wait for someone else? They say if you want a job done right, do it yourself, right? Most people believe in aliens, so they must exist. There you go, Philip. Yeah, that would be a case. I don't know if it's true, though, that most people believe in them. Do you guys? I mean, I'm not sure if I have a settled opinion on the matter, but I guess I would suppose it's likelier than not. But that's a good example anyway, Philip. I'm just kind of riffing on it after you said it. Sure. How about popular products and services? That's another possible case. Somebody says the best shoe on the market is the Nike Air Force One because it's the most popular shoe selling the most units. I don't know. If it's a good shoe, you'd have to look at what it actually feels like on the foot or what it looks like on the foot, depending on your interests and aesthetic values. This coffee must be good because you saw Obama drink it on TV. Fair enough. Yeah, sometimes you don't talk about the value of the product, but rather who is drinking it. If the person's a popular person and that's your only reason to support it, then that's popular appeal. You'd rather say what it is about the coffee itself that makes it taste good or that makes you think it is good. Okay, good. Those are fair examples. Appeal to ignorance. That's when somebody says that something is true just because it hasn't yet been proven false. Or, on the other hand, that it's false just because it has not yet been proven true. What do you think? Can you come up with something like that? An appeal to ignorance? The format will be, this is true. Why? Because no one has proven that it's not. What do you think? Something like that. Can you generate an example? Give you a moment here. There have to be blank, or this must be the case, simply because it hasn't been proven otherwise. Let's see. Appeal to ignorance? Once you know the form of the fallacy, it's kind of easy, I think, to just say anything that follows the format. If the format is X is true because nobody has proven that not X, then you just have to fill in X. What is it? There must be aliens since there's no proof that they don't exist. Okay, good, Nathan. Although I would say it's very close to an example that we discussed. Philip, the Illuminati control the entire world because it has not been disproven. That's kind of funny, right? You're dreaming right now because you can't prove to me that you're not. That would be another case of appeal to ignorance. Suppose that we argued that you know, you're making a claim about someone having done something bad, but you have no evidence for it. So, like, I don't know, you go to your neighbor and you're like, you stole my package, didn't you? They're like, no, what are you talking about? Be like, well, prove that you didn't, because I assume that you did until you could prove otherwise. That would be another case of making an inference without evidence, just saying that there's no evidence that it didn't happen. Okay, anyway, guys, good. I like the Illuminati example, though. That's kind of good. I actually live right next door to the Masonic Temple over here in Long Beach. So I sometimes wonder what's going on in there. You know, maybe someday I would join up just so I could claim to be a part of the Illuminati. But all joking aside, I watched a little documentary about it on Netflix a while back. It seems like a strange group, but I don't think that they're doing anything nefarious. So it's just a bunch of hype. Anyway, though, hasty generalization. Hasty generalization is when you jump to a universal claim based on a sample that's too small or that's not representative. Like if I say to you that, you know, my neighbors on both sides, they voted Republican, so must be that everyone in Long Beach is a Republican. That's not necessarily true. I'm just deriving it from, let's say, 2 examples of people that are close by. It's not a broad enough sample to generalize to the whole category of people in the area. One time my bike got stolen here. And what if I said, you know, this area is just a high crime city where things get stolen all the time, and I'm basing it on the one incident where one thing got taken from me. That might be overly hasty to reach such a general claim with only one individual item of evidence. So sometimes people like to be all or nothing in their thinking. They kind of like to just simplify and zoom to the idea that, hey, all of them are like that because I had a few experiences. I met a few women that were cheaters, so I think all women are cheaters. Met a few men that were abusive, so I think all men are abusive. In each different case here, the limited evidence that is used as the basis to draw the claim is not enough to support that generalization. Okay, straw man. When you take your opponent's argument and you misrepresent it to make it sound easier to defeat it. Like say that somebody told you, I think that we should reallocate some of the resources that we spend on a police force Maybe we should not have such militarized police force. Maybe we should cut the funding to some of the SWAT team type weapons and tactical gear, because they sometimes use those things in a way that makes them feel more like military fighters than keepers of the peace. What do you say to my argument that we should redistribute some funding, give it to like mental health services and other community support instead of the police? And then someone says, okay, here's what you're saying, get rid of the police, just abolish the police? Come on, if that's the case, then what are you going to do when someone breaks into your house? You're going to call a cowboy or something? I mean, so obviously that argument's crazy. But notice what happened right there. The person didn't say, let's get rid of the police. They just said, let's revisit our resource allocation to try and give the funds in the way that we think is going to serve the community the best. That didn't say eliminate the police, but the straw man critic of the argument mischaracterizes them as saying something much more radical, so that it sounds like it's a worse argument and easier to just blow out of the water. Okay. On the other hand, you can imagine someone saying, look, I think our police, they need to have the proper tools to keep themselves and the community safe, so I don't have a problem with them having certain types of semi-automatic weapons and stuff for certain occasions. And then somebody says, okay, so what you're saying is the police should just be able to come in and just blow us up with nuclear weapons and just come in like soldiers and roll in with tanks? That's insane, man. I mean, come on, don't you want these cops to have like some kind of task and duty to care for the public? But that, again, wasn't really what the first person said. So I'm just trying to show you how a straw man is a type of fallacy that could be conducted on whatever side of a political or policy or moral debate that people have. For pro-choice, someone could say, look, I think a woman has a right to choose because it's her body and the fetus is not yet a full person yet. Someone responds to them saying, okay, so what, you think it's okay for people to just kill their own children even after they're born? Wow, I can't believe that that's what you think. It's not what they argued, though. On the other hand, someone might say, look, a woman shouldn't be allowed to get an abortion because the fetus that's inside is already a human being, and a human being always has the right to life. And imagine someone says, okay, so what you're saying is we should just lock women up and have them answer to their husbands so they can't make any choices. You don't want women to be free, so your argument's terrible. But in both cases, we've overhyped and exaggerated the content of the original argument. That's why it would be called straw man. Finally, there's, from the fallacies of relevance, there's red herring. Red herring fallacy is, again, when you try to distract from the main point of the argument and you bring up a different unrelated topic. I think of examples from politics a lot because it's a common source of fallacies in our everyday political discourse and media. But I could refer to both of the current and the previous president on red herring. With Trump, famously, when he was called out by Hillary Clinton for his policy choices and positions, he would say, but what about your emails? Like as if the email was the real issue, but it's completely unrelated to the topic of the debated question. Like they'll ask Trump, how is your border wall policy going to really help the country and prevent the flow of drugs and illegal immigration? And he'll say, look, I don't want to hear criticism of my policy until someone finds this lady's emails. But that's not related. So he's trying to evade the question by bringing up an unrelated topic. On the other hand, with Biden, recently I saw he had a press conference, and one of the first questions was about the border situation because some have argued that we've seen a surge in migrants coming to the south border because some argue that they think that there's a more lenient president now that's going to be less punitive about detaining and family separation and stuff, which probably is true. But anyway, they asked him about that. What are we doing about the surge of migrants at the southern border? Is that getting out of control? And Biden said, look, what I was really elected to do was to fix the COVID problem. So let me talk about that, everyone. That's the real issue. And so he pivots away from the one thing he was asked about to a different topic. Sometimes that's called red herring. Okay. After that, it was just a list of fallacies of unwarranted assumption. And since that was what we covered recently on Tuesday, I don't know if I have to necessarily go through the full review of all of them. And we talked about 3 of them today at the beginning of the meeting. So the only ones I guess you can go back and look in your notes and in lectures to review again would be begging the question, inappropriate appeal to authority, loaded question, false dilemma, and I think that's it, because today we talked about questionable cause, slippery slope, and naturalistic fallacy. So, I mean, that's about it for the meeting I had today. Don't forget, guys, your second homework is due anytime before midnight tonight. So if you just email me your submission before midnight, it'll be on time. And then I'll send the answer key on Saturday. And then all you'll have to do is be ready for this quiz that's coming up on Tuesday. we will not have a live stream meeting on Tuesday. It's just a day for a quiz. But when we return a week from then, well, a week from today, next week will be the next time we get together, will be Thursday the 22nd. Then we will start talking about the media and advertising and marketing. So we have a little bit of work still to do. Anyway, guys, let me know if everything's cool and good, and if so, then I'll close the stream. Whenever you guys are ready, just like to say goodbye before I do that. So are we all right? If you have any leftover questions or anything, don't let me go before you ask them. Just double checking. What do you say? Okay, thanks so much, Philip. Thanks for your comments and your attendance as usual. And same to you guys, Matthias, Lan, everybody else, Matt, Jordan, appreciate it. And as usual, if there's anything you need or any questions pop up in your mind, just email me and I'll be checking those messages. If you're still looking to check on any previous grades, certainly do that. And I'm happy to help you understand your grade and give you any of your past assignments or comments. All right, then. Have a good one and nice weekend, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.